So welcome back, everybody, uh, to our inaugural IIA virtual conference. I just want to take this opportunity to quickly also thank all of our sponsors who've made this happen for us, starting with our gold sponsors, Protiviti, ANB, MGC, RSA, and Mazars. Our silver sponsors, Sama, Infosys, and Concord, and our tech partners, Laser. It's due to their efforts that this conference was made complimentary for all the attendees, and we at IIA India are really thankful for all their support. Now let's get back to our second session, which deals with the business challenges and the strategic response that we need to provide that post COVID-19. I must let you all know that there has been a slight change in this session, but that's not taking away anything from the brilliant panel that we have put together. To kickstart this session, I want to once again welcome our president for IIA India, TK. TK is the group head of management assurance services at the Times Group. He has over 34 years of experience, many of them with Unilever, where he was for almost 22 years in various finance, commercial, treasury, audit, and general management roles. He's managed various business restructurings, supply chain, cost reduction programs, and M&A deals, and obviously has had oversight roles for Sarbanes-Oxley compliance of Unilever companies in Asia. He joined the Times Group as their group head of management assurance services in October of 2008, and that's a role that he currently holds, with responsibility for governance, independent reassurance, IFC, and audits of all their business verticals. He's also a director on the National Heart Institute of Delhi, and obviously he is currently the president of the Institute of Internal Auditors of India. So with that, TK, if I can hand over the session to yourself.
Thank you, Burzin, and good afternoon, good evening to everybody. And all of us have gone through some of the unprecedented experience in the last 6 months, which probably most of our generation would have never had. Looking back, the fact that we have all survived and going through this conference indeed appears to be a big achievement. Now, in this context, we would like to look at what corporates have done to survive, grow, and reorient themselves is the key topic which we thought we should hear from some of the experienced professionals in the field. We have today with us Mr. Uday Khanna, who is a guide, mentor, friend, philosopher to large number of finance professionals. Many in the industry today will certainly owe a great deal of gratitude to him for whatever career development he has done for us. In addition to that, he was non-executive chairman of Bata India. He was the CEO of Lafarge India, and he is on the independent director on the boards of Kotak Mahindra Bank, Castrol India, Pfizer, Pidilite Industries. And he has rich experience, worked in almost all the continents. He was the vice chairman of Unilever, Lever Brothers, Unilever Nigeria. He was senior vice president of finance for Unilever Asia. He was the financial controller and treasurer of Hindustan Lever and also director of exports. And he has received the Ordre National du Mérite from President Republic of France for promoting Indo-French trade relations. And he's also received Best Independent Director Award from Asian Center for Corporate Governance and Sustainability in 2008. Indeed, we are very grateful for Uday to be with us today. Thank you, Uday. Next, we have another great friend of mine, colleague Robin Banerjee, another Unilever expert. He's a business leader, author, and a blogger. And he has very wide experience in multiple industries. He has also worked in India and abroad, and is currently the managing director of Capri Hans India Limited, which is, I wouldn't call it an SME, but is a kind of perspective which he will bring from small enterprises. He's also on the board of SME Chamber of India. He's a chartered and a cost accountant, company secretary as well, voracious reader, voracious writer. He has written 2 books, Who Cheats and How, Who Blunders and How. And I'm sure most of you would have read his blogs in Economic Times online. I think welcome, Robin. Your experience indeed would be greatly useful for our members. Thirdly, we hardly need an introduction to Nagesh, the internal audit fraternity. He is the CAE and Chief Risk Officer of Tata Motors, ICICI Bank, Reliance Retail, and JSW. He is also Independent Director of Goa Carbons, Arvind Fashions, and MCX Corporation. He has received awards from ICAI and also Asian Confederation of Institute of Internal Auditors. He has also worked on bringing out a technical guide for the ICAI on risk-based banks. And welcome, Nagesh. I think your rich experience across would certainly be very, very useful for this discussion today. What I plan to do is to divide this discussion into 3 components. The challenges which are faced by the business in the last 6 months are broadly the people challenges. By and large, ultimately, everything boils down to how people have responded to the crisis. So we would look at the people challenges. We will look at the business continuity challenges, how business have responded, what they are doing right, what can probably be done more. And finally, in the context of the people challenges and the business continuity issues, how internal audit and risk managers are getting linked and integrated in enabling business in their turnaround and resilience. With these few brief words, I would like to start my initial discussions now. Some of you would have read in the last 2-3 days, articles were appearing in all financial dailies about a survey conducted by Oracle as well as by Microsoft. It said India is a country which has roughly, the country with more than 40% of the people are reporting a burnout and stress, etc., arising out of this COVID situation, which all of us have gone through. Job losses, anxiety about job continuity and loss of income, etc. Now, how do you think Indian industry has responded to this crisis? Have they been selfish? Have they been altruistic? Have they really looked after the staff well? I would like to hear from Mr. Khanna to start with. What does he think about what went well? What could have been done better?
Yeah, I think, it's a mixed bag. And one has to see, depending on the industry you are in and the state, whether you are large, medium, and what your internal situation of finances was. So it will be difficult to generalize. But from my experience, I think Indian industry has realized that the primary resource that they have is people. And therefore, the focus on the physical health of not only the people who have been working for you, but your associates, your third-party suppliers, your distributors. So most companies that I'm aware of spent an inordinate of time trying to reassure the people and trying to extend them help in terms of their safety, whether it was giving insurance cover to even distributors, salesmen, and or making the place safe to work. To the extent that physical presence was required. So in my view, I think by and large, Indian industry has been able to reassure its people, give hopeful optimism to the people going forward. And I think the tone at the top has been good, because in almost all the companies I'm associated with, it's the top half that took the cuts in, and the bottom half was not touched at all. And reassurances have been given within the constraints of course, being financially viable and being sustainable in the long term. So, and I think it underscores the whole issue of educating, engaging, and enabling our people through dialogue, conference calls, to how do you, get them to reach their potential. And I'm one who believes, while auditors normally see themselves as opposite of the human relations function, I believe every manager should spend at least 20% of his time developing his people. And if you do that, you get the response.
That's very well put, Uday. That comes out of your experience, the time you have spent developing people. That's an excellent insight. Robin, what do you think? How have SMEs have responded? Probably the ones who have been hit enormously during the crisis. The large guys anyway can take care, their finances were sound, they had a good management team, etc. Probably the more pain was seen by the SMEs who had to shut down immediately. What's your experience? What? Unmute.
Thanks, Mark. Unfortunately, a large section of the Indian industry have not looked after their most important asset, which is the people. If it was, we wouldn't have seen the scenes of migrating labor walking on the roads for thousands of miles going home. Why should anyone leave their place of work if they were looked after? When 24th of March, the lockdown was announced in India, the whole of April and almost the middle of May or whole of May, we saw these scenes of thousands of people walking on the street with their families. It's because I think many parts of the industry, and whether it is SME or not, I'm not too sure, perhaps SME, the trading community, the trader community, the small shops and so on and so forth, did not provide the confidence to their employees that don't worry, you stay back, we will take care of you. They only wanted a home to be a shelter, and they only wanted 2 meals a day. That, if the assurance was given, we wouldn't have heard or seen or experienced this tremendous human tragedy which the country has gone through for 2 months. So to answer this question rather negatively, I think the broad spectrum of the Indian entrepreneurship failed in delivering to the most important asset, which is human being. However, as Uday rightly mentioned, a large section of the industry, which is especially the medium and large sector, has done extremely well through looking after their people, through the social distancing, of course, giving them solace and confidence. But yes, but the what would I say, the underbelly of Indian industries, I think, will let our people down.
That's a very interesting perspective. Probably we could have been a little more altruistic, probably prepared to spend a little more money, personal wealth, probably at the smaller level, could have probably transitioned us in the last 6 months much better for the underbelly, the population of the country. And I think that's very well brought out, Robin. Nagesh, what do you think, your perspective from a service industry? You have had a close association with the service industry. What do you think service industries have addressed this problem where probably the large number of layoffs in retail and salary cuts have happened?
I think first thing first, thank you very much for inviting me to this panel, TK. It's always great to be back in IIA, where I was the past president, so it's a great thing. So thanks for that. I think Uday has rightly put it, and Robin has also talked about the immigrating labor that we saw on that account. I sit on quite a few boards where I would like to distinguish them into two parts. There were some on which I am sitting on board, like I'm on a commodity exchange. I am also on banking business, which were part of the essential services. We were working all throughout in that particular period of time. And of course, we had, like I am on fashions company where our income was zero for almost 3 months on that account. So everybody has taken the roles, and accordingly they have taken the positions depending on what they can afford. But I must say that most of the people look at everything on a long-term basis very clearly on that account. But where you yourself is not sure about your own existence, then you first take care of you rather than taking care of the rest of the people. So in that context, I must say the companies on which I am on the board, they are all well-to-do kind of company. Though they suffered a lot of losses, they always kept a long-term perspective in mind. And even a company like, one of the companies where what I call, I'm in that discretionary spend. So not many people will venture and buy, the new clothes around that point of time in this particular thing. I think by and large, most of the companies took care of not only their employees, but also their extended part of employment, namely the people who are taken on outsourced basis. Because they were always right in saying, I am looking at a long-term perspective. And especially I was fortunate that I was a part of a company which has created, their own kind of, almost like a gram, a big unit in Ahmedabad kind of thing. So considering all that particular part, I think by and large, most of the good companies took care of it. Maybe some of those typical ones which are more in unorganized sector, as Robin rightly said, they were probably the ones who probably we could have paid more attention. I think all states did pay attention to that particular part, but it was beyond control in the initial days. So this is what it is. So I feel by and large, industry had taken a very human approach, and they were quite considerate towards a lot of people. For instance, we were not only worried about our employees, we were also worried about our extended employees in outsourced agencies. And also we were concerned about our customers who were coming to our branches in that regard. So I think by and large, people had taken a human approach, is what my feeling is.
Right. So that's the interesting point of view coming from three different perspectives. That's interesting. What do you think can be done now? You think the medium and small industries now, the people are getting back? Is there optimism coming? Morning, we heard from the Reserve Bank governor, very optimistic speech. He said hope and confidence is back. Despite 9.5% GDP drop, and he was very optimistic. What do you think? Do you see the green shoots which are the SMEs, Robin, particularly those which you think are the affected now?
There is no doubt there are several green shoots. There is no doubt. The GST collection, which is almost close to 1,95,000 crore, itself is a huge green shoot. The huge green shoot is the auto sector has started doing well. Huge green shoots are that exports have started reviving. But another major minus is the imports haven't gone up as much it should because the consumptions are still lagging. Having said that, is the SME sector getting back? Yes and no. There are sectors which are doing extremely well. Pharma, components, food, immunity, hospitalization. So there are loads of sectors which are doing well. There are loads of sectors which are really struggling. I would believe that the SMEs have realized, or the below portion, the small and medium enterprises have realized that most of their businesses, they have had to reinvent themselves. And people who have been able to reinvent, entrepreneurs who have been able to restructure their businesses and question themselves, am I relevant in today's world and tomorrow's world? Rather than depending upon God to help. For instance, if someone was having a restaurant or someone was in the entertainment industry, to my mind, most of them have asked themselves the question that do I have to restructure and redefine my businesses? People who have done it have really gone forward. The 3 months moratorium the government gave, I think it helped a lot. Now there is a one-on-one restructuring between the banking system and the borrowers who are stretched, again is going to help. So in short, I would guess if you ask me a figure, I think 3/4 of the SME sector have been able to get back, have been able to regenerate themselves, but 1/4 are still struggling to imagine what is it they need to do in the changing world.
That's interesting. Uday, what do you think can happen? Do you think government needs to do more to address the small scale SME sector, which seems to be still having pains of recovery?
Yeah, I think, we have to break this up into the triangle of our country. And while Robin rightly mentioned that the socially, the most disadvantaged of our society suffered the most, and the migration was an example of that. But from that point of view, I mean, for large companies, what could they do? They first had to make sure their house was in order and their people were looked after. The second, of course, was that through their CSR, then you can direct something to the disadvantage, and which I'm sure most companies, if you see their CSR pattern, went almost all to look after the people who were migrating, etc., at least in major cases. But beyond that, I think, it would be difficult to accept the corporate sector and I am again speaking for the medium and large, and I'll come to the small scale. That I think is primarily the role of the government, and it is a much more holistic issue. It is a question of how do you look after them. We have been ignoring our town planning for centuries. People were living on the footpaths. We don't do anything. And therefore, while there is still need for increased empathy by almost all of us who are in the middle class or in the sector for the socially disadvantaged, my view is that the government has to fulfill that role. And therefore, I think more needs to be done at that level. And there may be, there could be a lot of suggestions on how that should be done. And I think as our major problem in India is not policy, it is implementation. And we are all managers. We know how to get work done. And that, unfortunately, the government is not tackling. And for some reason, people who are discharged with the implementation continue to feel that they are at the policy level, and we have such a hierarchical structure that only the last mile guy has to work, who's cleaning the dustbin, and everyone above that's issuing orders. So there needs to be a administrative reform. There needs to be accountability of people who are supposed to deliver the goods. And in this area, I think we have been found wanting.
That nicely sums up, Uday, what the Chief Economic Advisor was articulating a little while ago on reforms are the necessary conditions, but the sufficient conditions are in implementation that has to be addressed separately. That was very...
Yeah, but I disagree with that proposition. All of us, when we make our strategies in companies, we don't say somebody else implements. You are accountable to implement. And therefore, and this is the point I'm making, that you cannot keep making policies, and even the laws that we are getting these days, some of them are unimplementable. We are taking form over substance in our amendments, and you get an amendment a week trying to plug loopholes helter-skelter. I think we have the intellect in this country. We have world experts in every field, and I think we need to harness our collective intelligence in finding solutions. And how we do it, and that situation of trust between the central and state governments and between both the state governments. We don't have that to the extent that it is required. So of course, one has to be optimistic, and we are moving up. But are we realizing our potential or what we are capable of? I think there are question marks.
These are interesting thoughts, Uday, and I'm sure it's good for our members to reflect and also influence wherever they can. And that takes me to the next area of business continuity challenges, how the business have addressed. Now, I would like to start with Robin again. Now, you feel the business is back again, supply chain issues by and large have been sorted out, distributors are back in action, retail stores are working. You think the recovery is there? Do you see by and large it is there, or more needs to happen?
India has still the Bharat and India. So there are many parts of Bharat which are still having loads of COVID problem. So portions are getting opened, and suddenly there is a COVID attack and things shut down. The supply chain would only work when every SME, SB component manufacturer, every section of the supply chain starts working. And I have been noticing of late, while 70, 80, 90% starts working, suddenly 2 or 3 factories or smaller ones gets affected, and then it stops all of a sudden. And then it goes back to the square one. In fact, there are towns where one of my factories existing, which is in Nasik, there is still a restriction of 50% employment. We can only bring in 50% of our people inside the factory. So to answer the question, there are green shoots, things have started working, but if I have to give you a number, I think 90% of the economy has started working, 10% is still struggling, and that's because this unknown pandemic, which is hitting what time, is where the problem lies. Otherwise, the intent is to work, but there is practical difficulties in implementing it. Primarily because I think we, the people, do not follow two things. One, we are still not wearing our masks and we are still not doing social distancing. Social distancing, I understand because it's a country where people have small homes to stay, but nothing prevents us from wearing the mask, but we shall not wear it.
Well, that takes us to the typical Singapore model, benign dictatorship. Discipline, probably if we had, we would have faced this much better. That's, I think, very well put. That's probably the problem we have in our society, despite the price which Uday used to say that we pay too much for our democracy and the freedom which we enjoy. Nagesh, now, how do you think the supply chain issues are getting addressed? More importantly, are the corporations innovating and coming out with the right product mix, maybe which is quite appropriate to the current context where the purchasing power has declined and also income levels are low and people would like to save for the future, they're not sure, a lot of uncertainties. How are the corporate responding in coming out with appropriate product innovations and distribution innovations?
By and large, all companies, they took this as a nice break in between to do a lot of introspection from your side. I think everybody was spending a lot of time on strategy, on what to do kind of things. And most of the people, as the typical thing, after the war is over, that country invariably organizes great kind of budgets for defense related part. Similarly, now most of the organizations have started thinking their automation index, their digitalization speed. They are now looking at what can be done to make yourself far more efficient. What kind of products you want to retain, what kind of products you want to get out of it, where you can look at your alternate raw material, how you can beef up your sales channel. So all these kind of exercises started happening in a very structured fashion. And as you rightly said, just to give you one example, we were always very comfortable in one of the companies in retail, to sell it to, the what I call the brick and mortar businesses, where we always believed that, we had to go through our own stores, we had to go through our own kind of intermediation, kind of, dealers through which we had to go. Suddenly we realized that digitalization is the way to go. So a lot of percentage which was very low suddenly started going up. So this is where, the survival of the fittest started coming in, and people realized that unless and until we do digitalization, we go the e-way, we go the smart way, nothing will happen. So everybody sat down on that and came out with a methodology. Just to give you another example, KYC, we were always insisting, KYC means know your customer in banking business. We were always saying, you come to the branch, we want to see you, putting your signatures in the things. Now eKYC, a lot of things we started piggybacking on. We started realizing how to create into, without physical thing, what can we do to the customer? So we started reinventing all these kinds of things. So I always believe that, what digital plan we could have probably thought in the year 2030, people started discussing it today in 2020 kind of board scenario. So I think a lot of improvements have happened by virtue of that. And everybody is thinking what we can do. Just to give you one example, since we were in the clothes business, in that retail business, we decided to come out with masks, and we started doing masks in a big way so that, we can keep our employees, occupied and engaged. Our fixed costs also can get into that particular thing. So people came out with these kind of methodologies and varieties, which is good. One of the manufacturing company where we always had a problem of raw material, China factory became a big thing. We suddenly realized that on the other side, in the, the UAE related areas, we can get that kind of raw material from the eastern part of Europe. So this is how we started reinventing everything. So everybody started, things are falling in place in that regard. So a huge kind of improvements is happening in that. So it's a good introspection time. I'm sure like all of us individually, either we have put on weight or we have reduced. So we are looking at ourselves like that every industry has looked at it.
So by and large, you are saying, Nagesh, the Indian entrepreneur has been adaptive, and then he's
the Jugadu attitude. The Jugadu attitude was very much evident
to survive and
yes.
manage to come out with appropriate products and move on to different areas where he can keep growing, keep going. Uday, do you share that perspective across the extended value chain? What's
You
your
know,
perspective on the health of the value chain, from the vendors to the distributors? How do you think is it now based on your
So-
perspectives?
No, I think at the first stage, what I want to say is that India is actually hugely resource endowed in entrepreneurs and managers. Okay. And that's a resource which we sometimes don't recognize as often. And this comes to the fore when you have a dislocation like the one the endemic has done. And therefore, and the result, of course, digitization and transformation, digital has become the buzzword. Collaboration has become the buzzword. The flattening of structures has become the buzzword because you got to give responsibility down. The whole issue of experimentation and innovation has taken a new order. So I think all this is working, and hopefully something much better will come out of the turmoil that we are going through. And while again the results may be mixed, I mean, I know of industries, one large corporation, they set up in the last 3 months 30 offers for manufacturers for their production when they rebalanced their portfolio during the pandemic. And this has both in terms of raw material sourcing and for moving, as Robin was saying, if you want to take the production out of Nasik and give it to Nagpur or wherever that's possible. So I think and the second thing that has helped us all is that the crop and the villages have got purchasing power.
Yes.
So these are benefits that are playing to our companies, and if you have the ability to tap them. So, just to give you an example, if you looked after, let's say, the salesmen of your distributors, and they felt beholden to you and found that this is a good company, the net result of something like that has been that they've made sure that the sales where the market was have taken place. And at the same time, this company, I know, had zero outstandings. They had given credit in the initial stages of the pandemic, but the trade responded by saying, okay, you guys are good, I'm going to give it. So this whole issue of, enlightened capitalism or conscious capitalism, as you want to call it, has come into play. And I think this will have continuing benefits provided we can build the trust and make sure that, we take action against the guilty rather than changing the laws all the time. Because we were unable to block a certain issue. And that is where, because that's why we have the entrepreneurs. And I think, I would like to use Jugaad in a positive sense, but huge amount of innovation is coming up and suggestions from bottom up in many of the companies.
That's a very, very excellent point you made, and good to hear that Indian entrepreneurs and the down the line, the huge amount of innovations are coming. And also good to hear that those who have supported their vendors and their customers during the crisis are really reaping the benefit today. It's always this empathy and always works and comes back. Good karma always comes back to you if you have done well, taken care of your people, and then you automatically grow. That's the point you're making, Uday. I think very well
Absolutely.
made. Right. Another aspect which I would like to dwell on is an aspect which has been engaging the minds of the business, as well as particularly the risk management, internal audit professionals, the whole area of technological disruption, digitization, IT security, etc. Now, how have you perceived changes happening in this space? Suddenly we were thrown and we are all working from home, everybody is connected, and payments get approved from home, and all kinds of disruptions that we have had to adapt. What have corporations done to ensure cybersecurity is not a threat? We don't are suddenly saddled with huge frauds and huge exposures, whether it's data protection, whether it's asset protection, or financial frauds, which are numerous all over the world, which is an engagement which, Robin, any experience from your side? Particularly large corporations can employ large number of people and pay for all the virus protection software and security centers to protect themselves, but what can medium, small enterprises do, and what are they doing in this area?
The pandemic is good news for two sets of people. One set of people are the agriculturists. They did not get people or labor earlier. Now all the migrating labor are available in the farms to work for them. The second group of people are the internal auditors. They have reinvented themselves. All of us have now realized there is somebody called internal auditors who will take care of us when there is so much of security frauds and cyber frauds are taking place. Maybe I have made it in a jocular manner, these comments, but the fact of the matter is, surely the entrepreneurial community have realized that we have to have controls in place. It is a new normal. Things are going to happen behind our scene. The computers and IT world are going to take over. The finances, the money and the transactions and invoicing and suppliers are going to happen through this mode. And therefore the fraudsters have just perhaps become 10 times or 100 times more. And therefore the issue and the dependence on internal auditors, I think, has gone up significantly. And this is a huge opportunity for all of us here from your institution also now to deliver, because we need to provide the confidence to the industry saying that, guys, we know how to protect you. We know how to manage your business. And this is very important. I think that it is something which we all have to reinvent ourselves again to assure everyone that this profession called internal auditors have a new role to play.
Thank you, Robin. I think auditors will be delighted to hear that their jobs are safe, but most of us in the industry still don't think so. So we have to work extra hard to keep ourselves on the jobs, and happy to hear that that's, I'm sure our members would focus on. Nagesh, what do you think in the service industry where the threat is really, really very big? I mean, we keep hearing all kinds of problems all over the world, Wirecard and DFHL. And what do you think is happening in the area of cybersecurity?
I think I must say banking, financial services, and insurance and all other things. I think data protection and also the IT related part was very, very essential right from the beginning. And the importance of that was, known to everybody. And it was more emphasized by regulators from time to time. Reserve Bank is very particular about it, and so is IRD and everybody on that account. Everybody has got huge policies and people are implementing it. So it was not known in that way. And most of these people have what we call the core banking or core, insurance related software they have. So by and large, they know how to protect it. But as you rightly said, during that period of time, people started working from home. And I still remember in one of the banks, I don't want to quote that particular thing, I had suggested that let us only take laptops and let us not take desktop. They told us, no, it's a huge saving and all other things. The same guy, after that I had left the bank, the chairman of that, he said, no, I think 2 years back you told me this particular part. I never realized that we will not work for 5 months like this. I wish we had given, laptops at that point of time. So in the process, people have started realizing that importance is very important from our perspective to look at these kind of things. Additionally, it happened that people were only knowing, employee and probably his spouse in terms of where is he working. Now they suddenly realized that they never asked that employees were staying in what kind of house. Then they realized there are 3 brothers who are staying together. And out of these 3 brothers, 2 of them are working with your competitor. So probably that thing was not known. And when you are sitting, all of them are sitting in the one home, one doesn't know what kind of information gets spread on that account. And this has happened in one of the live examples of one of the IT company, where probably they decided to remove 1 or 2 people from that assignment because the quotation and all, they were worried about that it should not get to the another competitors in any which way. So this is where they started realizing employee, not only you should know your immediate employees, but your extended employees, relatives also. So like that, people are learning a lot of things in the process. And then with data protection bill coming in, something not as acute as GDPR, but I think India is also looking at it from that perspective. So I think everything will fall in right place. So it is a right time which has come for IT to get its well-deserved importance in that regard.
Yes. I think by and large, we have transitioned very well in the very short period. Thanks to the IT professionals and the capability the country has developed, seamlessly it moved on. Uday, what are you hearing from the boards which you head and audit committees which you
Yeah, so
chair? Are the large investments going in the area of cybersecurity? There's always a debate, ever increasing cost of investments in IT vis-a-vis the benefits, particularly now the investments asks are very high at a time when cost controls and investments are also is a challenge.
yeah. So firstly, I'd like to echo what Robin started with, that this has been a golden opportunity for the audit function to prove its value add and usefulness. Because when this turmoil happened, they are the only department which does not have a day-to-day job. And they know how the company functions. So when this happened, I mean, the profile of the audit departments actually became, because they were then sent on troubleshooting, assigned special projects to do, and kind of not only just worried about reassurance, but became in-house management consultants. Now, I think so this, from that point of view, a lot more people than finance people or ex-auditors have realized the importance of the function. And I think go a long way in raising the status. As far as the issue of investment is concerned, I've said it elsewhere that, audit should be able to always give a return on audit investment through the productivity savings and the system savings and that they bring about due to the work. And in my experience, at least, again, I'm restricting to large corporations where till the audit starts presenting, there is very little appreciation of, it is just seen as a cost center and not as a productivity improvement center. So this is something that I would recommend auditors also in their reports or periodically in their thing, come and look, this is the net improvement that arose in a company arising out of our work. And once they do that, they will get the resources. And I think that's a better way to get resources than, create some hue and cry and say, if you don't spend, ABC will happen, which is the scare factor. And today, of course, digitization is changing the rules of the game. You guys know better. Today, you can do 100% checks, which was alien in my days. We used to do statistical sampling and be experts at deciding what the sample should be. So it should now be online. It should be continuous and be able to adapt to the changed circumstances. So as Mr. Nagesh was saying, if you're working from home in a financial organization, not only are there security risks, there are control risks also. And we've seen this happening in many banks where you could override controls or share your password and make payments, and that has happened. So I think overall, we should use this opportunity to increase the appreciation and value added that audit brings. And coming to a stage where, I come from a school where audits, not just accountants and career auditors. You have a 50-50 mix between high potential managers from all functions getting into audit and going out and acting as a bench strength, which we have now proved because the auditors are the only one who are free to go and tackle issues as they were arising. You couldn't take the man out of his permanent job and do that. So the whole issue of audit as a training ground for high potential managers, audit as an interdisciplinary function so that it can bring its expertise to productivity improvements and value-added suggestions would be a kind of a virtuous cycle, in my view, for audit to get to the next stage.
That's a very interesting observation you have made, Uday, that corporations are looking up to auditors to assist them on projects. They have time now, they don't have operational responsibility. And most of us, that takes me seamlessly to the next section on how do corporations use internal audit risk management in the area of governance and business partnering and trusted advisory roles. And many corporations still, what we see is audit is still seen as somebody who would help them keep a control on frauds. Fraud finders will carry out forensic audits from time to time based on either whistleblower complaints or some entrepreneur or a family member had some people sitting across in some places who kept feeding on so and so is doing this, etc., kind of a thing by and large. Now, do you think the same level of maturity and engagement of the internal audit team, risk management team, as business partners, collaborators, advisors are beginning to happen in the SME world? Robin, how do you see this perception of the audit per se? We still have probably navigating in a spectrum where we are somewhere in between, neither here nor there in terms of as strategic advisors.
This question has two parts. The role of internal auditors and their contribution depends upon two things. First is the organizational ethos. Is the organization serious of good governance? And the second, which is the larger issue, is authority and responsibility go side by side. You can't have responsibility of an auditor to figure out what's wrong going on if you do not give the authority. So he or she needs to have the authority to figure out what's happening. And this is where it comes when an organization have, again, two types of frauds. There are these governance, which is structural governance issues, which is the corporation is structured on a fraudulent manner. What role the internal auditor can have is a big question. But when it comes to control weaknesses, that is, a cashier is running away with the money, or the purchase manager is getting bribes to purchase wrong things, is something perhaps internal auditors keeps doing. So it's a very important question. All of us perhaps will continue to struggle because the function of audit depends on the organizational ethos. And if we do not have concomitant authority and responsibility, very little we can do. However, as long as whatever we are supposed to do, we show our return on investment, that means we continue to add value to the powers that be and the entrepreneurial community, I think we survive and succeed and prosper.
Yogesh, how do you see is audit emerged as strategic advisors? Are they being looked upon to provide inputs on strategy, etc.? I've had experiences where we were told, this is not your role. Why are you asking me about strategy? Now, many a time you find businesses fail because of either poor strategy or poor strategy implementation, which results in huge amount of financial implications, reported results. You are a listed company or unlisted company. Subsequently, the senior managements, even a most ethical guy, need to have a very, very strong value system not to fudge. Subsequently, either he starts fudging the sales or starts fudging the expenses or starts reporting things which are really not there. I don't want to spend more time there. Bulk of our problems in the industrial, wherever, whichever part of the world we see is poor strategy design, poor strategy execution, and which results in failures, and then attempt to cover up the failures and keep it under wraps for a long time before the entire value of the organization is collapsed, and you have the governance professionals, internal audit professionals being questioned, where were you when all these things were happening? Now, do we get to play a role and in organizations where we say, look, what is happening is wrong, you shouldn't be doing this strategy, etc.? Do we really have the skill set, capabilities, and experience to challenge senior management? Are we there? Are we taking our younger people there? Is what I want to ask. Is it beginning to happen in the Indian industry?
I think a very good question, TK. I think, I have been in this profession since 1998 as Chief Internal Auditor, and of course, 4 years back, I left that as a profession. Now I'm part of Independent Director as Chair of Audit Committee. I think I must go on record that there is a tremendous improvement the way internal auditors are looked at by the organization. Certainly, as Robin rightly said, tone at the top counts a lot, and I'm presuming I'm only discussing those cases where there is a right kind of tone at the top. I'm not discussing those where there is no, no right tone at the top. Those companies, that is where you need to do your own barometer test, as I call it. Let's say as soon as the lockdown was announced on 24th March, did you get a call from your CEO or from your CFO to say, guys, your audit team, I want your help because there are a lot of challenges in that particular thing. There are only two kinds of things you will realize, that people were called immediately and otherwise people were never called. That means you were not even on your recall list. That means you are not in their scenario. And after some 15 days, they realize that anyway they had to make payment to you people. And by virtue of that, they say, "Arey, usko kuch kaam ko lagao." That means you put them on the job. So by virtue of that, they were given some tasks on that account. So if you belong to the second cadre, that means you have to look out for a job, is what I will say. If you are called on the day one, that for instance, I was a part of Bangalore International Airport. As soon as this got announced on 25th March morning, the entire audit team was called into the airport to see how they can help us out on that account. So what it means is basically, internal auditor needs to first of all know the business. He needs to know his own, I would say, skill sets, which I'm sure people over a period of time, thanks to IIA standards, we are in a position to understand. But business knowledge is important, and ability to get involved at the right time, not by way of keeping away. And this is where I always say, we used to have what we call IIA, 3 lines of defense. This itself was, according to me, in my personal view, it was a very, very, a wrong way of looking at it. We were looking at it both from how I can defend myself to say I am in that third line, I am not on the first and second line. So we were avoiding that, taking on business responsibility. Now, thankfully, IIA has improved it to say from third line of defense, they call it 3 lines of model, as I call it. If you are asking me, over a period of time, we should have 3 lines of model, because I want internal auditor to get involved with every business decision. I want them to get involved when there is a merger acquisition happening, when a new IT project coming in, anything new strategy, new product they are talking about, they should get involved. And that was happening when I was in ICICI Bank, because we used to have a very specialized team from internal audit, which was a part of what we call, we will give it to you on a business unit perspective, so that we can clear a lot of things before the product is rolled out. So unless and until you have that kind of dynamic team which you have created, you will not be able to do what I call value add. Otherwise, we will only doing value preservation. So I think this is where internal auditor has to start looking at it, how I can get associated with the business. So far, they don't do it. They will remain in that third line of defense, and slowly over a period of time will lose its importance.
That's very interesting, Nagesh, bringing out how across the lines of defense audit can play a role under a situation where the lines of control itself are blurring due to technology. Uday, you have been an evangelist over the years of using internal audit as a strategic tool for training high potential people, which you have articulated several times. Do you think audit is able to attract the kind of skills, kind of mindset, training, experience to challenge businesses? By and large, we are finance people and we do number crunching better, we understand that better. Do you think we need to change our curriculum, training and inputs to make auditors? First of all, you need to be a sound business manager before you really start engaging on strategic matters, which really makes an impact to the business. How do we focus on this?
I think absolutely. This really, I think, depends as management evolves and companies become more professional. I think this will kind of automatically happen. The issue really is that how do you see the role of audit? So now one of the things is that, we are very, most large companies are very clear on having the minimum numbers necessary, whether it's accountants or not. And therefore what happens when a man leaves, you have a 3-month vacancy, you hire another one who's less trained, you pay him more money, and there's a cost attached to it. I'm a firm believer of keeping bench strength in your audit department of various functions. That's how it becomes multidisciplinary. So when, let's say tomorrow your accountant leaves, or even an HR or a marketing guy leaves, you can put in somebody who knows the company, who has been trained to sort of look at controls, which is what a general manager's first ability is, how you manage risk. So I think the role of the audit function has to be defined by the board. And I think barring many multinationals, of course, and very few of the Indian companies, this has not been recognized as. So we still call it the internal check department rather than, and the reporting function. So I think, I mean, if the internal audit is reporting to the CNF for that company has not evolved to the stage you're wanting it to come, has to report to the CEO. Now, of course, in banks, there are other things where you should report to audit committee, and the less said, the better about RBI's recommendations. And I see Nagesh is smiling. But I think this has to come, and it's a thing. Then it is, are you adding value? If you've done that, so I don't think we should, it's the audit department that has to sell itself and say, we can do this, we can do this for you. And again, coming to the point that, Robin made, that the first thing is, do internal auditors consider themselves as professionals? Then the issue is, what is a profession? Now, profession is defined as somebody who has expert knowledge, who keeps gaining his knowledge and goes by a code of conduct and adherence to the universal values of truth, moral integrity, self-empathy, etc. So if we start considering ourselves as professionals, from day one, you will start influencing the organization as it influences you. And if you find that you're in a situation where there's no uniformity, you're being asked to turn a blind eye on many things, etc., etc., as a professional, in my view, you should leave. And that's a very strong statement to make. Now, I know that whether lawyers, chartered accountant, the word professional, we are not living true to that word, what it means. And that's where the first training has to start. And once you do that, then you have to add value. And if there is, even if you discover a small instance, depending on how you do the RC and how you present it to management, can be a 2-minute thing. This happened, so you sack the guy, or these are the controls necessary so it won't happen again. So I think we need to start going into the depths. And I'll quote a close friend of mine, Harish Manwani, has a saying, which he says, you should be able to see the big picture and the pixels at the same time. Okay, so this is not mine, I've named the author who I heard it from. Now, are we developing, and I think the institute has a large thing to start doing the curriculum. And how many auditors have become CEOs, for instance? And I don't mean chartered accountants who become, I mean internal auditors who become. And the fact is that in the old days, GE is not as well known today, but I remember Jack Welch once saying he would not make a general manager if the guy had not worked in audit. Okay. So use it as a developing ground and have career auditors. So each person has to decide, I want to be a general manager, I want to be an auditor. But allow for the mixing to take place and the collective intelligence and feeding on each other to develop either general managers or outstanding auditors. And even auditors should have a code of conduct. Huh? That's absolutely essential, how you behave, what you do with your report. You don't discuss your report, issue it before discussing with the auditee. Simple things like that. Large institutions in our country don't conform to. And therefore, I don't call them, I mean, he may be the highest ranking government auditor, but he's not an auditor if he releases his report without discussing with the auditee. Now, that's the professional conduct part that has to be, because otherwise, abhi kuch bhi chalega, the kind of situation will take us down the wrong road.
That's excellent summary which you have made, Uday. Personal and professional integrity, how we stand up is an important thing, the value systems. And then one last question before I have only 2 minutes to close. Yeah. You mentioned about big picture and pixels. I want to pick up 1 or 2 questions which are come up in the area of technology really. Now, would we all become auditors who have to be experts on SQL going forward? What is the extent of change our professional people have to undergo in terms of practices, skill sets, etc., going forward in the emerged digital world? I mean, quickly, I want to just start with Robin and then close with each of you.
The answer is yes. We have to be a forensic auditor. For that, you need to know the nitty-gritty as to how the IT system functions and how to unravel a mystery behind the numbers. You also have to see the big picture. So Uday's summary of Harish Manwani saying the pixel and the big picture. Every auditor must know that. The auditor must know the strategic intent and also what is growing in the ground, which is the forensic audit. It is absolutely necessary both to happen. Only then the success will come and we'll be able to provide confidence to the entrepreneurial community. Yes, we can add value and we can do it.
Thank you, Robin. Nagesh, your final words?
You know, we used to have what we call corporate dress mandatory. Now people will say your digital sense is mandatory. Unless and until you have the digital skills. And I always say, you have to, what I call, you know, there are two parts. You have digital native and you have digital migrant. People who are not digital, digitally savvy, they have to migrate to become digital native over a period of time. So if you don't become, you will be left behind. So today, without digitalization, there is no internal audit. That's all.
Uday, your thoughts?
Yeah, you know, the point I was making, that audit department, it should have specialists. So an expert forensic auditor who's the best in his profession can stay and should have a career in audit. And he can be the permanent career auditor in that department. But you must also have general manager potential people from all functions coming and cross-fertilizing. Because, you know, the point I'm making is the forensic auditor is the world expert in forensic, become head of audit, he'll not be able to grasp the whole big picture. And then you start sub-optimizing. I would go to the extent of saying the head of audit should have been a general manager before he becomes the head of audit. Then you see the value add, because he knows the practicality. When he goes with a suggestion, nobody can tell him, you've never run a business, how can you tell me this? But it's an evolutionary, it has to start. Various companies will be in various stages, so cannot be done overnight. But I think the responsibility on the auditor or the individual himself to prove by going beyond the ordinary, by showing the initiative, by taking, going outside as well and saying, fine, I did this, but I also saw this. And then be able to cascade it up because ultimately, you know, in the pyramid, although I'm talking of flattening the pyramid, it's based on value add that you will climb the ladder. But
thank you, Uday. And sorry.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you. And I think we run out of time. Burzin is already there waiting for me to hand over. And Burzin gave me 5 minutes late, so I'm not really delayed. Thanks, Uday. Thanks, Robin. Thanks, Nagesh. It's been a wonderful discussion. I'm sure members will immensely benefit from the discussions. Thank you very much once again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So much.
Thank you, TK. And gentlemen, on behalf of IIA India, once again, our thanks for sparing your time on this Friday afternoon and sharing your thoughts with us.